A couple of videos ago, we went over 8 of the most surprising NHL players to start out this season. Now I want to flip that and shift focus to 8 of the most disappointing players to start out this season. And of course, this is all relative to the expectations that I had for these players coming into the season, so feel free to let me know what your list would look like down below in the comments. I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and get started with last year's Calder Trophy winner defenseman Moritz Seider of the Detroit Red Wings, who is currently in the midst of a classic sophomore slump. Now, I definitely wouldn't say Seider has been bad. I honestly think he's probably still been Detroit's best overall defenseman so far this season, but as a Red Wings fan, I had some sky-high expectations for Seider heading into the season, so I've definitely been a little underwhelmed with his start. I think some of the reasons for Seider's slow start to the season: number one, he's not going to catch anybody by surprise anymore. He has a year in the NHL under his belt. The league knows who Moritz Seider is. They game plan accordingly. He also has a ton of new teammates that he didn't have last year. The Red Wings, of course, had a very busy offseason. Steve Yzerman went out and made some big additions, not just up front, but on the back end as well, getting the likes of Ben Sherratt and Olli Maatta on the left side. Sherratt and Seider have been pretty much stapled together on the Red Wings top pairing this season, and I wouldn't say that pairing has looked terrible, but they haven't looked the greatest either. They're still kind of in that feeling out process of learning to play together, working out the kinks. I think Seider's definitely going to get more comfortable and just get better as the season goes along. You can already see he's kind of looking more like the Moritz Seider we saw last season. The first, 2 weeks of the year was pretty rough for Seider, but he has looked much better over the past 3 to 5 games, probably with the exception of that 1/3 period against the New York Rangers, where no defenseman on the Red Wings even looked like an NHL caliber player. I'm definitely not worried about Seider. I really feel like we're going to end up just chalking this up to a slow start to the season, and he's going to get back to his two-way dominance in no time. Next up, we have the first of 3 goaltenders we're going to talk about today, Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks, who has had an absolute nightmare of a start to his season. Just 1 win so far for Thatcher Demko through his first 11 games. He has a goals against average north of 4, a sub 880 save percentage, and already a negative 11.39 goals saved above expected. He has been completely terrible. Obviously, the Vancouver Canucks in front of him haven't been good either, but Thatcher Demko certainly isn't doing them any favors. He isn't bailing them out. This looks like a completely different player right now from the Thatcher Demko we got so used to seeing over the past couple of seasons, where he established himself as a top 10 goaltender in the league. I certainly don't expect this type of play from Thatcher Demko to last much longer. He's way too good of a goaltender to be putting up these kinds of numbers. He knows he has to be much better. The Vancouver Canucks know that he has to be much better, and I'm sure they trust that he will, as they should, but I really feel like if they want to have any chance of turning their season around, it has to start in net with Thatcher Demko. Next up on the list, we have Jesperi Kotkaniemi of the Carolina Hurricanes, who since joining the Carolina Hurricanes after signing an offer sheet in the summer of 2021 has still yet to really break out with them and take that next step. The Hurricanes didn't give Kotkaniemi that contract extension that pays him about $4.8 million a season until 2030 because of what he had done in his NHL career. Up until that point, they paid him that kind of money, hoping that he would eventually develop into the player that's worth that kind of deal. Now, yes, Kotkaniemi is still incredibly young. He's only 22 years old, but he is already in his 5th NHL season, and I feel like ideally for a guy that you're paying almost $5 million a season for, you probably want a little bit better production than 1 goal and 2 assists in 16 games. That kind of production is definitely a big step back from last year, despite the fact that this season he has seen a pretty significant increase in his ice time, going from about 12 minutes last year to almost 16 minutes this year. Now, that being said, I don't think Jesperi Kotkaniemi is necessarily playing bad. He's actually developed into quite the responsible 200-foot player early on in his career. His possession numbers have always been really solid throughout his first 5 seasons as well, but given everything Carolina has invested in Kotkaniemi at this point, the draft picks, his compensation that they had to give up to Montreal when they successfully offer sheeted him, the contract extension, I think you want a little bit more in return than what you're getting right now. Continuing on now, the next player we have is Sam Reinhart of the Florida Panthers, who last year in his first season with the Panthers quietly had a massive career year with 33 goals and 82 points in 78 games, career highs across the board. And so far this season, Sam Reinhart has not even been able to come close to replicate those kind of numbers again. He's really struggling to produce with just 2 goals and 5 total points through the Panthers' first 15 games, despite averaging over 20 minutes of ice time per game, which is a career high for him by far. The Panthers as a whole have had a really weird start to the season. Like, they're not in a bad spot right now. They're 2 games over 500, but you can tell that they're all still kind of getting used to, the big change of the Matthew Tkachuk trade that happened in the offseason. They've also had some pretty big injuries to that blue line already as well. But once the Panthers really start to gel and get on a little bit of a roll, which ultimately I expect to happen at some point, then you have to assume Sam Reinhart is going to get going as well. Moving along now, next up on the list, we have goaltender Jack Campbell of the Edmonton Oilers, who signed a 5-year, $25 million deal with the team in the offseason, and early returns on that deal are not looking so hot. The 30-year-old is currently rocking a 4.27 goals against average, an .873 save percentage, and a negative 7.81 goals saved above expected. Sure, he's got a record of 6-4, but I mean, that'll happen when you got the likes of McDavid and Draisaitl scoring at a 2-point per game pace. Of all the players in this video, like most of these, I'm just going to chalk it up to they're off to a slow start, they're in a bit of a slump. That happens. I feel like Jack Campbell is the player in this video that I would probably be most worried about, because he's 30 years old, and it's not like he was a world beater last year. Yeah, his numbers were a little bit inflated in terms of his save percentage, at least because of how hot he started the season, but like from January on, he really wasn't the greatest. He was just playing for a really good team, and that's pretty much what we've seen from Jack Campbell so far this season, just to a much more extreme extent. I obviously don't expect him to keep up these numbers all season long. There's no way he's that bad, but things definitely aren't looking good for him so far in Edmonton. Luckily for the Oilers, Stuart Skinner has been a massive bright spot early on in the season for them. He's looked great, and if things keep going like this, before you know it, Jack Campbell is going to find himself as the backup for this Oilers team, and I feel like we're already kind of getting close to that point, which is crazy considering we're only about a month into the season. Moving on now to the next player that I want to talk about, Alex Newhook of the Colorado Avalanche. This is a player that I had really high expectations for coming into the season. A few months before the season started, I made a video talking about players that I think would break out this year. I had Newhook in that video, especially with all the departures that the Avalanche had in the offseason. Burakovsky signing in Seattle, and then obviously the big one, Nazem Kadri signing in Calgary. That left some pretty big holes in the top 6, especially at that 2C position, and I figured that it would be a perfect opportunity for somebody like Alex Newhook to take that next big step, play a much bigger role, and kind of help the Avalanche overcome some of the losses that they suffered in the offseason. But so far, Newhook hasn't really grabbed that opportunity and ran with it just yet. His ice time is just about the same as it was last season. His production in terms of points per game is actually down from last season. He's got just 3 points so far on the year. Now, he is still 21. This isn't a player that I'm worried about long term or anything like that, but like I said at the start of the video, this is all relative to the expectations that I had for these players coming into the year, and because I was so high on Newhook, because I had such big expectations for him, I've definitely been a little bit underwhelmed by his start to the season. Moving along now to the final goaltender we're going to talk about in this video, Andrei Vasilevskiy of the Tampa Bay Lightning, a guy who has been widely regarded as one of, if not the best goaltenders in the NHL for like 6 or 7 years now. In seasons throughout his career in which he started 40 or more games, he's never finished with below a .916 save percentage. I feel like that kind of consistency, especially at the goaltending position, which is so wildly unpredictable in the NHL, just speaks to how good he's been for such a long time. This season, however, Vasilevskiy has looked human. He's actually kind of struggled out of the gate, rocking just an .898 save percentage and a 3.10 goals against average through his first 11 starts. Now, he does have a positive goal saved above expected, which is a positive sign. It's not like Vasilevskiy has been completely awful, but he's just not the world beater that we've gotten so used to watching, for the past 5, 6, 7 years. I definitely wouldn't be worried about Vasilevskiy at all, though, by any means, just because of the consistency that he's shown throughout his career. I just feel like this is a guy that's probably a little bit tired with the regular season. Like, he has nothing to prove. He's won Vezina trophies. He just wants to get to the playoffs and compete for another Stanley Cup. And I honestly feel like that's kind of the case with the entire Tampa Bay Lightning roster. They're sort of just coasting along throughout the regular season so far, and when it comes time to turn it on, they're going to do that. And now for the final player we're going to talk about in today's video, Jonathan Huberdeau of the Calgary Flames, a guy who obviously last season broke the NHL single season record for assists by a left winger, finished the season with 115 points. He has been an absolute superstar for a couple of years now, but so far this season on his new team, the Calgary Flames, he hasn't been producing like one. Just 7 points so far through 12 games for Jonathan Huberdeau, and you can tell his style of play isn't the best fit in a Daryl Sutter system. Jonathan Huberdeau returned to the lineup last night from injury, and he actually slotted in on the third line. He did it. He was able to score a goal, which is a good sign for him. Hopefully that can kind of kickstart him a little bit, but it's definitely been a pretty difficult adjustment period for Jonathan Huberdeau coming from the Florida Panthers to the Calgary Flames. This is a player that I really wouldn't worry about just because of how good he is when it comes to, the best of the best in the NHL. They're going to figure figure it out no matter what, and I feel like Huberdeau eventually will. And it's not like Jonathan Huberdeau has been bad by any means, it's just he's a player that is held to such a high standard, and rightfully so, because of the production we've seen from him from the past couple seasons. So his start of the season, his start to his tenure with the Flames has definitely been pretty disappointing. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those were, in my opinion, 8 of the most disappointing NHL players so far to start out the 2022-23 season. Like always, I want to know what you guys have to say, so leave your list down below in the comment section. If there's any player that I didn't cover in this video that you've been disappointed by, let me know who those players are. And while you're down there, if you could, please be sure to drop a like on the video. That is the best way to show your support and let me know that you want to see more videos like this throughout the season. And last but not least, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all season long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.